not every single day that a chain launches a token. And today, that day has arrived for Arbitrum. So I just want to give a huge congratulations to the Arbitrum team. Steven's coming up onto the stage right now. I know that you only get to drop a token once. I know this is a very big deal. I know the team is very excited that this day has finally arrived, because this is a step into the world of decentralization, where Arbitrum goes from a project by the Arbitrum team to a project owned and operated by the community. And this is that day. Harry, Steven, Ed, how's it going, guys? How are you guys feeling?
Amazing.
Feeling great.
Slightly low on sleep.
I can only imagine. Yeah. So I got to ask, how long did you guys know that today would be the day?
That's a great question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the truth is, we've been targeting this general time period for quite some time now, but the actual specific day only locked down in the past few weeks.
So give us a little peek to the sentiment behind on the Arbitrum team. Like, how's morale doing? How are you guys feeling just overall? What's the vibe like?
People are super excited internally. I personally am very excited, and I think the team is as well. If you take a look at both the technical work that came out today, right, we've launched, besides for the rollup that existed, we've launched an entire full self-executing governing system. And there was a lot of work that went in there and audits that went into that all happened in private because people didn't know we were developing this. But also just look at the sheer amount of written material, amount of work that went into the airdrop. There was full company press for many months on getting to today. And I think people are rightfully very proud of the technical milestone, very proud of all the work that went into it. And I am personally super proud to be a part of this team. And it's the polish and the amount of material and thoughtfulness that went into the governance, the criteria for the airdrop, and the documentation, everything around this launch it amazes me.
Yeah. The other thing just to throw in that I think I'm really excited about today, and it's probably not the thing that most people have on the top of their mind, is what was additionally announced, which is Arbitrum Orbit, which is the ability for people to launch their own L3 chains on top of Arbitrum One and Arbitrum Nova, which is extremely exciting from a developer perspective, just because it means that kind of not only will there be a couple chains running this code, but there could be any number of chains in a massive ecosystem running this code, which is amazing.
Yeah, this is really the culmination of so much of the work that we've done across the whole team ever since the beginning of Arbitrum. I feel we have raised this child and now it's ready to be an adult and go out into the world. And it's been a long journey to get to this point, and Arbitrum has a long way to go from here. But it's a huge moment, and really it's something we've been building towards since really the very beginning.
I really like that perspective, Ed. I personally view all of these chains as alive systems. And this is something that's new in crypto, of course, right? Like in the old world of software and the Web 2 world, you have, all right, our code is ready to ship to production. And we have that in crypto as well. But you also have this additional milestone that, okay, Arbitrum shipped to production a while ago. That already happened. But now the code seems to be ready, according to you guys, to not only be shipped to production, but also shipped to the community. And that is the milestone that we're seeing. And I really just enjoy, I've been going through some of your guys' documents, but of course, not only is this the launch of the token, but also the launch of the reason for the token, which seems to be governing over the licensing of Arbitrum technology to build more and more Arbitrum chains upon Arbitrum chains. And so to me, this just gets me excited, because it seems to be just the moment that Arbitrum seems ready to have its own Cambrian growth of its own chains and its own ecosystem. At least that's my interpretation. Is that perhaps what you guys see as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think that with the launch of Arbitrum Orbit, we are basically putting another tool in the hands of developers. And I think we'll see massive amounts of innovation on the app level and the dApp level that we see today, but also on the chain level. And I think we'll continue to see lots of innovation here. And I'm super excited to see what other people go ahead and build now that this technology is easily available for them to use.
I think we also have today something that I'm super excited about, which is a message, I think, to the broader Ethereum community that decentralized rollups are really here, that Vitalik set out some number of months ago a kind of spectrum of stages of decentralization for rollups. And I think that Arbitrum rollup is the first rollup with kind of significant value on it to reach stage one, which is a really exciting place to be in. And I think to me, like, it's making good on this kind of rollup centric future path that we've been on for a while, which is just insanely exciting.
Harry, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and hopefully you can walk us through these phases, right? So Arbitrum is perhaps the first rollup chain to reach phase one. What is phase one? And then how far away is phase two after that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of main difference in stage one, the main kind of two, and I'm sure there'll be some people who get annoyed at me for not being 100% accurate, but the two big parts of stage one are working fraud or validity proofs so that the kind of security mechanism of the rollup is fully operational. And to the degree that there is an upgrade capacity that's connected to a multisig, having that be at least 9 signers and at least 75% not in a single organization. And so we've had the working fraud proof mechanism since we launched now. But the big thing added today that gets us there is now with the launch of the DAO, there is also the transition over to a security council that is chosen by the DAO of 12 members, which kind of give much, much greater assurance of kind of decentralization and security than you could have without that. So that's stage one. Stage two will be what you would think of as a really full rollup. And that kind of, at that point, basically, the biggest things you're looking for are that anybody can submit fraud proofs, with the launch of the DAO, the fraud proof mechanism is still permissioned with a relatively wide set of people who already have the ability to post those proofs. And I think that there's a lot of exciting development in terms of actually getting to that fully permissionless point. And then the other main criteria is to even further weaken the powers of the Security Council, which I also expect to see a lot of progress on coming up over the next year. And that's when you reach the point where it's there. It's the kind of full promise of what rollups should be to Ethereum is completely fulfilled at that point.
So we're now entering a mode where upgrades to the Arbitrum software on the main Arbitrum chains will be decided by the DAO. But through DAO proposals, the Security Council has the ability to step in should there be a security emergency. But in the normal case, upgrades or improvements or administrative changes to these chains will be DAO decisions, and they'll run through the normal governance mechanism. And importantly, we have self-activating or on-chain governance, meaning that when the DAO decides something, it gets executed directly by the governance contracts. It doesn't require anyone to act in order to make the DAO's decision happen on the net.
So there's a bunch of just roll-up skeptics or Ethereum scalability skeptics out there. And I think what you guys are really saying is that with this launch of fully on-chain executable governance and live validity proofs or fraud proofs, Arbitrum is actually proving that people that don't necessarily believe in the Ethereum roll-up vision, because the roll-ups of the current state of things aren't actually decentralized, proving them wrong. And this is that day that we actually get to show that Arbitrum is leading this effort here. This is my interpretation. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Couldn't improve on how you put it.
Thank you guys for giving us something to show to all the Ethereum haters out there who never really believed that these rollups could actually become as decentralized as you guys are making them here today. And I really want to double down on the fully on-chain, fully executable governance. So with what is being announced today, this is not merely some sort of snapshot vote of what perhaps the team ought to do. This is direct on-chain governance of the ARB token, and that will fully execute without having to have any sort of trusted intermediary in that process. This is correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. Control of kind of the entirety of the protocol.
Yes, and to be clear, there are the DAO can do things that are on-chain, the DAO can do things that are funding rated off-chain, but anything related to the on-chain actions will be fundamentally controlled by the DAO, and you won't need someone else to go ahead and pick up a multi-sig to actually execute the will of the DAO. There's glue between those two items. So when the DAO votes, that's actually what executes the on-chain actions.
And so I think from reading the docs here, the first big power that this token has is licensing over Arbitrum technology. So if people want to add an additional Arbitrum chain, either a new chain that settles to Ethereum or a new chain that settles to one of the already existing Arbitrum layer 2s, be it Arbitrum 1 or Arbitrum Nova, this is what the token has power over, the Arbitrum technology for more Arbitrum chains. Is that right? Can one of you guys unpack that?
So yeah, so the token has power over the particular chains, Arbitrum 1 and Arbitrum Nova, and the direction of those chains and how those chains will evolve and what the technology of those chains, what technology upgrades those chains will adopt and those chains will fund and pursue. But additionally, as you're alluding to, it also has broader power over the licensing of new chains. And indeed, built into the Constitution is that if you want to build a layer 3 in the Arbitrum ecosystem, so that's a layer 3 that settles to Nova or any other future chain that the DAO approves, that is completely your right, and you can modify the code, you can customize it, and you don't need to go to the DAO, you don't need any permission. If, however, so layer 3s are completely permissionless, you don't need to go to the DAO. If, however, you want to go ahead and launch a layer 2 on Ethereum. Now, this is actually, so it's a bit of a controversial topic. On the one hand, there are those that believe we should open source everything. On the other hand, there are those that say, no, you should keep your edge, and Arbitrum has the best technology today, and we shouldn't give that to our competitors. And our solution to that is, why don't we give this to the community to decide? The community will do what's in its best interest. So if the community wants to go ahead and give its technology to a different layer 2 on Ethereum, all they have to do is come with a governance proposal, and the DAO has the full ability to go ahead and license that chain. But the last thing that I'll mention as well is in the Constitution is a set of values. And one of those values are that we are Ethereum aligned. And therefore, the DAO, while the DAO will consider proposals for layer 2s, the Constitution really limits that to Ethereum, and the technology should be based on Ethereum and scaling Ethereum at its core.
And so, Stephen, you said that this power is being given over to the community, but that begs the question, who exactly is the community? And the obvious answer to that is who got the Arbitrum token. But then that brings me to my question, who did get the Arbitrum token? Can you guys walk us through the criteria for receiving the airdrop? How might one have gotten selected to receive a distribution of the Arbitrum token?
Absolutely. So there were two parts of the Arbitrum airdrop. In total, there were 12.75% of the token supply will be given out next Thursday on March 23rd. And there's the user airdrop broadly and the DAO airdrop. So most of that, roughly 11.5%, is part of the user airdrop. And in order to be eligible for this, you had to use Arbitrum in a meaningful way any time from its launch in August of 2021 up until the snapshot date, which was on February 6th, a few weeks ago. There were eligibility criteria, basically a point system. And actually, if you log in on the Arbitrum.Foundation, there's a site which will show you and map you out to all the points that you got or didn't get. And these points were for usage in Arbitrum 1 and Arbitrum Nova. And they consider things like bridging liquidity, how much liquidity you bridged, transacting value, how much value you transacted, how many transactions you did, how many smart contracts you transacted with, and also things like over what period of time did you transact? Were all your transactions in a single day, or were you a sustained user of Arbitrum over the course of many months? And the idea is to really look at users and try to find the real users of Arbitrum. And they don't have to only be power users, but users that are legitimate users of the protocol, because that's who you want to govern the protocol. We also did have people could lose points if they were doing activities that were consistent with sibling or airdrop farming. They would lose points in that point system, and then at the end of the day, all the points that they had would be tallied up, and there was a simple table that goes ahead and translates that into the amount of tokens in the airdrop. Now, the thing is, that's the user airdrop. The realization is we can never be perfect. And there are definitely sometimes, for example, it's hard to discern between an early user who recently started using Arbitrum, so has a few transactions, and an airdrop farmer that just does a transaction and doesn't come back. And therefore, we said, can we have another mechanism that captures more users from a different angle? And that's what the DAO airdrop is. The DAO airdrop is we are giving tokens to DAOs on Arbitrum, specifically protocols with DAOs, with communities on Arbitrum. And the idea is we're giving the tokens directly to those protocols. And again, there's a series of metrics that look at things like how long have they been on Arbitrum? What is the transaction volume they're doing in Arbitrum? What is the TVL? How much value is being transacted, and a series of other metrics. If they're a multi-chain, are they multi-chain or are they Arbitrum specific? If they're multi-chain, what percentage of their treasury and activity is on Arbitrum? So really a broad set of categories that help determine what the allocation given to these DAOs was. And again, ultimately the idea is that the DAOs know their communities, where the communities are the DAO, and they will know the best way to include their communities and give the tokens to distribute tokens to their communities. And therefore, we're having double coverage here. Hopefully, many users got tokens in the user airdrop. And by the way, the reason why you can't give everyone, we're giving out 12.7%. The Arbitrum Foundation is giving out 12.75% of the token supply. And if you just think that there's a limit, there's a tension here between giving more people and then just giving everyone who got less. So what the foundation did, and they actually worked together with us at Offchain and worked together with Nansen over the course of many months to come up with these criteria and optimize for giving a strong set of Arbitrum users, but also making sure that those who got a meaningful vision in the governance. And so those were broadly the two categories of the airdrop, but there was one exception to the DAO airdrop, and that was we gave one DAO that isn't really an Arbitrum project, and that is the Protocol Guild. For those that are not familiar, the Protocol Guild is a collection of Ethereum contributors and core developers, and Arbitrum is connected at the hip to Ethereum, and we felt it very appropriate as a thank you for all the important work that we benefit from, that these folks do to make sure they're included. And frankly, these are definitely the folks that we would love to have a say in the Arbitrum governance long term. So the foundation did go ahead and also included the Protocol Guild, even though technically it wouldn't be eligible because it wasn't an Arbitrum protocol.
Yeah, just a huge +1 on that. The Protocol Guild is really just the core devs of Ethereum and the people that are contributing. It's a thankless job, and that's why this is such a great thing to do, is to give the people who are working a thankless job thanks, which is what this was. Me as an Ethereum enthusiast, I thank you guys for doing that. These are crucially important people to the overall Ethereum ecosystem. So giving back to the Protocol Guild is something I'm glad you guys are taking leadership on. And I just want to go back to the idea of airdropping tokens to Arbitrum DAO. And I think this is something that really Arbitrum had this great opportunity to do, which was like the Arbitrum ecosystem itself. The network state, if you will, of Arbitrum is sufficiently large that it started to bifurcate into its own communities, its own like sub-communities. And so it seems to be that you guys have the foundation has chosen to include DAOs in the distribution plan of the token. And it's in my mind, an interpretation of decentralization. It's like the foundation doesn't know what's best for Arbitrum is so large that the foundation doesn't know what's best for the ecosystem as a whole. So it's punted on some responsibility of distributing the token to DAOs and allowing the DAOs to decide amongst themselves how to distribute the rest of the token to their individual community members. Is that the right philosophy to take on this?
Yes, that's exactly the right philosophy. And as you said, it is a unique position that Arbitrum was in that it had this developed community and really sub-communities. And the Arbitrum Foundation and Nansen working together and Offchain working together can do our best, but ultimately it is the DAOs that know that their communities know their usage patterns and know how to give those tokens over. And so we're fortunate that Arbitrum has those communities and the abilities to do that. But yeah, that's exactly right. And one thing which we hope is, you mentioned the Protocol Guilds, for example, we hope to set a precedent with this, that others will do that going forward as well. Because as you mentioned, there's very important work, but often thankless. And hopefully there'll be a little more thanks going forward in the future.
One of the really nice aspects of involving Protocol Guild in L2 governance is that there really are important links, connections between what happens at L1 and what happens at L2. And everyone benefits when L1 core developers who have the visibility they have are involved in L2 governance. And everyone benefits when L2s are in that conversation as well about the evolution of L1. I think the Ethereum community has done a really good job of that so far. And you can see the airdrop to the Protocol Guild as really being about driving that collaboration even further.
Stephen, you said something like 12 point something percent of the token was airdropped to the users of Arbitrum. What percentage of tokens were given to DAOs as well?
Yeah, so it was about 11.5% was given to the users. The 12.75 was the total, and then it was roughly 1.25% that was given to the DAOs.
And then can you just walk us through the remainder of the pie chart, the overall total distribution?
Yeah, we have the exact decimal terms in the documentations, and I'll get those wrong, but broadly 44% went to insiders. By insiders here, the team and future team, advisors, and also investors, and 56% went to the community. And again, these are rounded numbers. Look at the docs for the 2 precision decimal point numbers, but that is basically the rough allocation. I'll actually have the numbers right here. 26.94% went to team and future team and advisors, investors 17.53%, DAOs in the Arbitrum ecosystem 1.13%, individual wallets 11.62%, and the DAO treasury, which is basically the remaining community portion that wasn't given up or won't be given in the airdrop, is 42.78%. So a majority is given over to the community. And one thing that I want to stress actually as well, those team members and investors, their tokens, whereas the airdrop tokens will be live and be transferable next week, the team and investors are subject to 4-year lockups. So it's a 4-year lockup in its entirety. What that means is, and it has a 1-year cliff. So for those that are not familiar with this, basically nothing unlocks for 1 year. In 1 year, the first quarter unlocks. Then over the next 3 years, their monthly unlocks for the equal portions for the remaining 3 years. These will unlock over a significant period of time. And the idea is that during that time, the Arbitrum Foundation, Arbitrum DAO, are tasked with continuing to distribute and make via grant programs and the remaining community portion, or more, I should say, of the community portion to the community. And the other important thing is to note the team, particularly the team at Offchain Labs, when they're employed at Offchain Labs, has been instructed not to directly vote with their tokens. Instead, we are encouraged and encouraging those that work with us to delegate to community members as well. So explicit instructions not to vote the tokens, but to delegate to community members. And the idea is, in the long run, the representation is exactly the community has a majority of the representation. But even in the short run or in the medium run, as those tokens are trickling down and getting to the hands of the community, there will be a push for the insiders to go ahead and boost the community's governance and the community's say by delegating to community members who are not part of the team.
And just to get the details of the lockup clear, it's a 4-year lockup. So it's the way that I'm visualizing this in my head. It's like it's linearly unlocking from now to 4 years, but for 1 year of time, nothing gets unlocked. And then in 1 year of time, 1 year's worth of tokens does get unlocked, and then it's linear for the remainder of the 4 years. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay, cool. And then the 42.8% of the tokens that are in the Arbitrum DAO treasury, those are just like, there's nothing set for those tokens to do. Those are just like inert tokens that like the community will be able to vote on. And so those 43% of total tokens is basically tokens governed by the DAO, right?
Yes, with one exception, though. There is the foundation that has people working there servicing the needs of the DAO. And the foundation, Arbitrum Foundation has posted today AIP1, which is the first Arbitrum improvement proposal, which basically would grant the foundation some discretionary budget from those tokens to do things like smaller grant programs and the like that don't need to go through the chain. Again, it's all going through AIP1, but the idea is there could be discretionary budget in the foundation as well. And indeed, there is a proposal live to give, I believe it's 750 million tokens to the foundation in a discretionary capacity so that it can further implement the needs of the community and the DAO.
Beautiful. And there's a 7-day period where the token is not claimable. So I'm looking at the website now. I'm watching the countdown ticker before people can claim the token. What's the thought process behind the 7 days? Why do we have a 7-day freeze?
Yeah, so the thought process was, it's well known and really well established that the best way, so there are users that want to vote their tokens, and that's great. Those users are encouraged to use. And there are users that don't want to actively vote their tokens. And the idea of delegation has been well established by other projects before us, where users can go ahead and delegate those tokens to someone else, to a different community member. And that's what I was just mentioning, whereas the members of the Offchain Labs team are encouraged to delegate their tokens to community members. And by delegating, basically what one says is, I could say, if I delegate my tokens, I own these tokens, but I'm giving over the voting power to this person. And of course, that could be changed over time, but it's what delegation is. And the question is, who are these delegates? And sorry, one more piece is, it's been shown and established, and that the most successful way to encourage people to delegate their tokens is to have that as part of the token claiming process. Because for users that don't want to be active, they're going to claim their tokens, they may just sit there. Whereas if it's part of the claiming process, they're encouraged to click that button and delegate, they may do that. And then ultimately the governance will be more representative, there'll be more people voting and more people's voices represented. The foundation really wanted delegation to be part of the claiming process. But then the question is, if on day one everything becomes claimable, how do you go ahead and insert those delegates into the process, right? There's like a chicken and egg problem here where we want the thing to be claimable, we need the delegates, but we need to announce the things before delegates can go ahead and apply. There is something one could do where one could go ahead and in a closed door process, go ahead and approach people and say, hey, before launch, we or the foundation could have approached people and said, hey, do you want to be a delegate for the Arbitrum airdrop? But we, as has always been our ethos, wanted to do a fair process. And therefore, what the foundation did is it opened up an application process where anybody can apply to be a delegate, whether it doesn't need to be someone that the foundation goes ahead and asks privately. And therefore, in order to actually facilitate having that process where delegates can nominate themselves to the Arbitrum Foundation and be included in the claiming flow, it was necessary to have a delay, and a week's delay is a good amount of time for delegates to submit their applications and the foundation to go ahead and review those and get them set up in the UI. So when claiming comes, users will have an easy flow where they can pick delegates and learn a little bit about those delegates and what they stand for and decide who they want to delegate to if they don't want to vote their own tokens. And again, just to be clear, users are encouraged and more than welcome to vote their own tokens, but also delegation is an important part of the process for users that don't want to do that. And users are encouraged to go ahead and submit those delegate applications to the foundation, so if they want to take an active role in governance.
I'm going to go ahead and do a quick plug. We have a live stream on Bankless with y'all later today at 4 p.m. Eastern. And let me tell you, having this Twitter space is making the agenda production for that live stream very easy. We have a lot more to talk about, though, because there's the idea to talk about the decentralization plan of the actual Arbitrum chain or chains. And there's two topics of conversation here, the validation of the Arbitrum chains and also the Security Council. Can you talk about how the Arbitrum 1 and Arbitrum Nova chains, how are we going to decentralize the validation of that chain? Is there a plan in place for that?
The starting point for this, of course, is that the DAO is in control of that process, and the DAO is going to make the decisions about what happens when. Right now, there's a set of validators who are on board and validating the chain, and the DAO can choose to change or expand that set of validators as they wish. And I wouldn't be too surprised if the DAO does decide to expand that set some. There are some complicated technical issues around making validation fully permissionless. And I expect there will be a fair amount of debate in the DAO about that, about the pros and cons, and about what would need to happen technically in order to make validation, to get to a point where the DAO wants to make validation fully permissionless. But I think that process will happen over time and ultimately is in the hands of the DAO. As far as the Security Council goes, as was said before, it's a 9 of 12 multi-sig involving 12 members of the community who were chosen both for being respected in the community and also for being diverse in terms of their perspectives and geographically diverse. But importantly, the Security Council is, over time, elected by the DAO. Every 6 months, there will be an election in which half of the seats in the Security Council are up for re-election. And so the DAO will get to choose who's on that Security Council. The Security Council will be able to act quickly by that 9 of 12 multi-sig if there is a security emergency. But normally, the Security Council's job will just be to be ready for that. And the DAO will get to choose who will represent them on that council over time.
And so this is a part of the idea of Arbitrum actually going into a decentralized rollup where the fraud proof mechanism is actually live and operational, but this 9 of 12 multi-sig is having its hands ready to catch it in case anything goes wrong. Is that kind of the right way to view this?
Yeah, you could think of it as being a mechanism that is in place in case there is a security emergency. If there is a critical vulnerability that happens, the best way to protect the community is to have some group of people who can act quickly and who can have a full and open discussion of the vulnerability. And obviously, if there is a critical vulnerability that's exploitable, you don't want to have an extended debate within the DAO about exactly how it's exploitable and what to do about it. That would require faster action. But at the same time, obviously, it's a power that needs to be exercised really judiciously on behalf of the DAO. And so the design that the foundation ended up on was one that relies on this 9 of 12 multi-sig, that it's re-elected by the DAO over time, and really only has the role of stepping in should there be a serious security vulnerability.
And that right there is basically what gets at one of the biggest core pieces. And really those two topics that were discussed are the biggest core pieces that kind of make up the difference between a stage 1 decentralized rollup and a stage 2 decentralized rollup. And I think there's a lot of promising ideas floating around the ecosystem in general for really getting to that kind of final point. So just for one example, being the idea of having a security council that can pause the system but not do anything else. And so I think there's some really promising areas of kind of thought and research that get us to that kind of final stage.
Yeah, and it's in the hands of the DAO how and when that happens over time. As confidence in the system and concern about the possibility of a critical vulnerability reduces over time, the DAO can decide how comfortable they are with reducing the powers of the Security Council or even eliminating the Security Council entirely.
So I'm curious if Vitalik has talked about the need to move beyond just raw token vote at times. I'm wondering if there's any talk about like a 2-house token model or if governance wanted to change governance structure into something different, how might that happen? I'm just wondering if you guys have put any thought into 2-house token model at all for governance.
So fundamentally, governance has pretty arbitrary ability to mutate itself. And so one of, I think, the kind of tenets in mind behind how the system is structured is to have the DAO be as flexible as possible. There's kind of the rate that new ideas come around and research comes around in the kind of broader blockchain ecosystem is obviously incredible. And so having that flexibility to explore newer, better models over time is something that kind of, I think, is really of core importance to the ownership of the system that the DAO has.
Beautiful.
And just to make that a little bit more specific, there is a constitution of the Arbitrum DAO that lays out the procedures. And that constitution can be amended by the DAO members. So if the DAO decides they want governance to work in a different way, that can be debated through that process, and they can decide they want to do it a different way and set up a different structure.
Yeah, we haven't actually gone straight into the Constitution conversation. Where can people find the Arbitrum Constitution? And can you just give us TLDR of the whole thing, if that's possible?
Yeah, all of this stuff can be found from the Arbitrum.Foundation site. Fundamentally, the Constitution is a document and that lays out the basics, which are the chains that the DAO governs, how do votes work, and it lays out the details of how long the voting lasts and delays that happen after a vote, talks about the role of the Security Council and how the Security Council elections work. It lays out a bunch of the nuts and bolts of how the governance mechanism works. But fundamentally, like any constitution, it is an amendable document, and the DAO can decide to pass AIPs that change the constitution. And the constitution itself talks about the fact that it can be amended by a vote of the DAO. And so fundamentally, to dig a little bit into what the Constitution does, it talks about the procedures by which the DAO can vote and decide how proposals happen and so on. And it divides the proposals that can be made into two categories, constitutional and non-constitutional. Constitutional are ones that arguably have higher stakes. It involves changes to the DAO governance procedures themselves and also changes to the code. Any kind of software update or change to important parameters of the system requires a slightly higher threshold of votes in favor. All this is really laid out in the Constitution, and this was the best guess or best thinking as laid out by the foundation to get things started. But after that, the DAO's in charge and can change anything.
And one more time, Ed, just drop the URL for people to go check that out.
Sure, will do. So Arbitrum.Foundation is the starting point for all of this. If you go under the Learn tab there, under Governance Docs, there's all kinds of information, and the Constitution is available there. It's at docs.arbitrum.foundation/-constitution. You go there, it's all there, you can read it, and it's intended to really lay down the details of how governance will work in a way that's super clear, so people don't have to argue about what was intended, and so that if the DAO wants to change something, they know what it is that they have to change.
And I just want to take that opportunity to shill the DAO doc site for a second, which is incredibly detailed and information packed, and is, if you really want to get into the guts of how these things work and how everything is implemented and what all the rules are, it's an amazing resource.
Yeah. The other place you could look, if you're inclined that way, is to look at the code of the governance contracts, because all of this stuff, because it's executable on-chain governance, you can go and read the code and see how it is implementing the language of the Constitution in code.
Guys, thank you so much for all of this so far. I think the last topic of conversation that we still have to touch on is this brand new thing called Arbitrum Orbit. We talked a little bit about new Arbitrum chains on top of Arbitrum chains, but we haven't actually named the name Arbitrum Orbit yet. Who wants to guide us through this conversation? Where does this really start?
Yeah,
Stephen, go for it.
No, please, Harry, go for it.
That kind of one of the big things that there were a lot of announcements today. I can barely keep track. But as I was saying earlier, one of the ones that I think is incredibly cool to me. If you look backwards, for a long time, the Arbitrum code base has been using BSL license, the same license type originally, at least in the blockchain space, well known for being used by Uniswap. And in a way, there's measuring this balance of essentially protecting kind of the core chain, but really which kind of runs against, I would say, like a lot of open source principles that I know, like I personally really believe in. And one of the changes that has become public today is this alteration to the licensing scheme, which allows for anybody to use the Arbitrum Nitro codebase to run layer 3 chains of any kind, really to do anything you want with it on top of an Arbitrum DAO, and on top of an Arbitrum layer 2 chain. And so like this to me it opens up this amazing spectrum of possibilities. I think the earliest thing you will see, and the kind of most standard thing you will see, is basically just people taking the code as is, deploying their own L3 that's just looks a lot like Arbitrum 1, except it's a layer 3 chain running on top of Arbitrum 1, but it's still EVM. It still looks like what you would expect. But there's this whole universe of possibilities that you get into when you think about the fact that people can mess with this code however they want. They can alter this code however they want. If you want to launch a L3 version of Arbitrum that implements some weird EIPs that are proposed for Ethereum but haven't been accepted yet, you totally can if you're launching a new Arbitrum chain on top of Arbitrum 1. So the amount of innovation this will allow for, to me, is mind-boggling.
So I have to ask, is there any sort of alpha that you guys have for us? What's the first Arbitrum layer 3 chain that's going to come to be deployed to Arbitrum? Do we know anything about this?
We have a lot of alpha today, which is there's an Arbitrum token. But a good question. The answer is yes. So as you might expect, over the course of the past many months, this has been a request that we've gotten. And actually, just to add on what Harry said, people have asked the question, like, why today? Why is today the day? Like, why is the news not just about the Arbitrum token and DAO governance? Why is it about this Arbitrum Orbit as well? And the answer, which I think your line of questioning really gets to and you understand, but I'll just say it just for everyone, is these are very connected. Giving over permissions to the community to build on the chain and to license other L2s to put that in the hands of the community, there has to be a community first. There has to be a DAO. And this is the natural time to do that and to really empower the community in that way as well. But definitely before this was live, before the foundation was live, people did approach us and ask us at Offchain Labs, hey, could we use the Arbitrum technology? And there are definitely people lined up that will be using them. I think the first one that I know of, I don't know, open and it's there. So I can't tell you the first one because anything that I know could be front run because this is permissionless and anyone can go ahead and build an L3 chain. But one that I know is coming is a gaming project, a successful gaming project from a different ecosystem that plans to build their own Arbitrum layer 3 chain. And that I think will be announced. My understanding is they'll announce that in the next week or two. But like I said, now that it's open and permissionless, I would be not surprised at all if they're not the first or not the second one to announce their plans, because no one needs to come to the Arbitrum Foundation or anyone to get the permission to launch an L3 chain. And that's why we think the innovation that this will enable is going to be so powerful, because people will just be able to experiment and build additional chains. Like Harry said, they can test out particular EIP. They'll have full customizability and ability to change and modify the code as they want. And it's powerful. And this gives them the best technology available. They have the full tools to decentralize in their hands, and they can build these chains. And one other thing which we put in the announcement is, with the upcoming launch of Arbitrum Stylus, that will be something that's also available to these chains. So the ability to write code in additional programming languages, well, starting with C+ and Rust, that's not going to be limited. That's not going to be limited to any specific chains. Any Arbitrum chain will have the ability to include that if they want to. Again, it'll be up to the DAO or whoever governs that particular chain to decide if they want to launch that, but the code will be available for them.
Sorry, I need to jump in and say there, Stephen, what you just said just gave me such RB Nyan vibes.
Harry, I'm going to need help on that one. What are RB Nyan vibes?
So this was when Arbitrum 1 originally launched on mainnet. There were a large number of teams that had planned out in advance to launch and had done kind of a lot of technical work and preparation in order to be ready to launch on Arbitrum, and who launched. But the sort of first main kind of big driver of activity on the chain was a meme coin in like the most classic blockchain fashion that we had no idea. I think we still, at least personally, I still have no idea to this day who made that project, which was really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's a throwback. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, we're all saying this is now decentralized, this is in the hands of the community. So making predictive statements about what the next big chain that's coming to Arbitrum, we don't really know, because now this is decentralized. It's up to the fate is outside of the hands of anyone here. But I think really just the only comparable that I've seen of this inside of the Ethereum ecosystem is actually Uniswap v3 is still under license at the moment, and there's a protocol, a Volts protocol, that wanted to use Uniswap v3 code in its code base. And so the Volts DAO made a proposal to the Uniswap DAO to give permission to use the Uniswap v3 license inside of Volts for 1% of all Volts tokens. And that proposal was accepted by Uniswap DAO. And then 1% of Volts tokens ended up inside of the Uniswap treasury. And that is something that did happen. Not many people talk about that, but this is like the only comparable that I see of like now Arbitrum governance has power over code. And so this is perhaps something to see coming in the future.
Sorry, just to stress though, for layer 3s, that the Arbitrum constitution governs this. For layer 3s on a different Arbitrum chain, one wouldn't need to go and propose to the Arbitrum DAO to do that. They would just have the ability granted to them automatically. So it's a bit of a mix, right? For layer 2s, it's exactly like that Uniswap example, but for layer 3s, it's completely open and permissionless.
Okay. So deploying Arbitrum chains on top of already existing Arbitrum chains is totally permissionless, but spinning up an alternative layer 2 that uses Arbitrum technology is something that has to be given permission by the DAO. Is that correct?
Exactly. The philosophy of that is basically the Arbitrum community should be the one to decide what's best for its interests. It's clearly beneficial for the Arbitrum community to have healthy and vibrant ecosystem of layer 3 chains on top of the Arbitrum governed chains, or whether it's to the benefit of the Arbitrum ecosystem to license to a different layer 2 that's selling directly to Ethereum. It may not be, and that's, in my opinion, of whether it is, may be different than your opinion, and that's why we think the best here is allowing the DAO to decide.
Two more just small things I want to add. One being, I am so excited to see, there's no plan for this at all, but like I'm sure it'll come at some point. I am so excited to see the first time there is a hackathon where there are like many different teams of hackers, each customizing and building their own Arbitrum chain. That just seems like such a cool idea to me. And then the other, just because you mentioned Uniswap, so this reminded me of one, I think somebody shilled me on this at ETH Denver. Uniswap v4 depends on this EIP to Ethereum that has not been accepted, that's been relatively fought over, called transient storage. So the one thing you could do as an L3 is launch an L3 chain that actually implements transient storage and launch Uniswap v4 on it.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that really excite me about this layer 2, layer 3 space the most, is that it actually can become more adaptable and more flexible and be more in the future than the Ethereum layer 1. But the idea there is that it's actually going to be easier to implement EIPs on the Ethereum layer 1 after that they are live in production on layer 2s and layer 3s, because now we actually have something that's between a testnet and the Ethereum layer 1, which is in production layer 2. This is like one of the biggest things that excites me about the accelerating pace of Ethereum innovation.
Yeah, the result of this is really, I think, I would expect a Cambrian explosion of all kinds of different customizations and variations. And of course, you then get a community of people who have different things that get recombined and mashed up against each other. And so I'm really excited and hope to see a really vibrant community of people trying things out in the L3 space, and the best innovations that come from there being eventually adopted by the DAO back into the layer 2 level. So really, it opens up a whole space of innovation for a lot of people in a way that I think is going to be really.
Guys, I've already learned so much on this, and so I'm going to plug our live stream later today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That is in 5 hours from right now. We'll be covering a lot of this and a few more topics as well. So anyone listening who wants more Arbitrum content on Arbitrum Day, definitely tune in for that one. I think that we've covered everything significant. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Ed, I just want to turn this last question to you. Remind us how early the Arbitrum project got started, because this was once upon a time an academic effort. So here we are in 2023. With the launch of a decentralized Arbitrum technology. Take us all the way back to the earliest days of Arbitrum and remind us how long of a journey it's been.
Yeah, the whole thing started in, believe it or not, in March of 2014. I was a professor at Princeton at the time, and we hosted a conference about blockchain tech. And I got really excited talking to people there about smart contracts and what they could do and all the innovation they would enable. There wasn't even a smart contract-based chain really out there at all. Ethereum was really still on the drawing board at that point. But it became clear that, I think, at least to me, that this was going to be a huge deal, and also that there were going to be challenges in scaling it. And so the original idea for what we now call interactive fraud proofs, which is still implemented in Arbitrum today, came to me back then, and I drew it on my whiteboard. It sat on my whiteboard for much of 2014. A bunch of students built a sort of very proto version of Arbitrum then. And eventually, one now famous day later, in early 2017, Harry and Stephen came into my office and said, hey, remember that Arbitrum thing? This is the right time. Let's build it. So from then, that day in 2014 through that day in 2017, when the three of us got together and started working together on it, up until today, it's been a long journey. In hindsight, you can see from the very beginning the germ of what Arbitrum is now and the germ of what's happening today, going all the way back to the beginning, because it has been the vision all along to try to build out this scaling to make it as flexible, as customizable as possible, and to deliver it into a fully functional and decentralized system. Now, we've made it a huge distance down that road. There's a lot more to do, and we're really excited to be passing the baton to the DAO today.
Ed, I know it's been a very long journey, and it's cool that it's made it all of this way. So a big congratulations to all of the Arbitrum founders, co-founders, team members, and everyone who's helped create this day to finally arrive. I know this is a big day for you guys. I also know it's only the starting point, right? So there's always two races here. There's the race of, like I said, the Arbitrum team building Arbitrum, and then the Arbitrum community taking it the rest of the way. And this is day one of that. And congratulations for making it all the way here, guys.
Thank you so much.
And huge thanks to our team, really. Without so many smart and hardworking and dedicated people, we really couldn't have gotten to where we are. It's really been about the team. It's been about the community. And really, we want to thank everyone who's played a part in this.
It's just so wild that this is instantaneously both, like, in a lot of ways, the end of something, but then also just the start of something that is, like, so much bigger, which is incredible.
It's like our kid is grown up, and that's not the end of the story, right? Now that Arbitrum is emerging from its awkward adolescence and is becoming a grown-up system, it has a lot of exciting times ahead of it.
Congratulations, guys. A last opportunity to give a call to action. What do people listening right now need to go do? Where should they go? Where do they need to find out more? And what should they do now that this day has arrived?
Yeah, so they can go ahead and read the Arbitrum governance docs, read the Constitution, and also I would say when reading that, think about how they can get involved. Remember, this is about the community and it's about the people and it's about really being inclusive to a much, much larger set of people that aren't outsiders, but they're insiders. They become part of the DAO. So I'd encourage people to go ahead to Arbitrum.Foundation and check their airdrop eligibility. And if they're eligible, that's great. If they're not eligible, don't despair. There will be many other ways and opportunities to participate and contribute to the Arbitrum community. And over the next several weeks, the foundation will be announcing grant programs and the like. So please keep an eye out for that. And also immediate things for those that are inclined, go ahead and submit a delegate application to be a delegate. That is an excellent way to really participate in the community, participate in the voting, and participate in defining the future of Arbitrum. So with that, please get involved in one of many ways.